Sometimes a song will cut into you out of nowhere. Sometimes I like the way a certain set of lyrics sounds, and I don't think too much about the meaning behind it. Maybe what draws me in most is the melody and the music that surrounds the lyrics. But to examine the lyrics on their own then either reveals a deep concept or else brings up a wealth of questions. Maybe a little of both. Today, I want to focus these thoughts on a segment from the song Rainy Day by Coldplay. For sure, I'm drawn in most by the way the band has presented this part. The layering of the vocals in a way that breaks from the rest of the song is almost entrancing to me. It's not exactly inconsistent, but it stands out. Then there was the lyrics. The rhyme of it is so pleasing. The deeper that the knife goes in, the more you win. You end up with less than where you begin the deeper that the knife goes in. The repetitive end cap to this verse helps to build its bubble that separates this segment out from the rest of the song. The deeper that the knife goes in. Wow! That's quite a loaded statement on its own. Of course, one of the things that makes Coldplay's music so successful is its accessibility. Chris writes his lyrics often vaguely enough that a multitude of interpretations can exist for a single song, and each one is equally as valid. My first thought in hearing the deeper that the knife goes in is the idea of being kicked while you're down. When you get into a period of life where it just seems like everything is working against you. That knife is already in and it just keeps getting pushed further and further. In my last video about Glass of Water, I mentioned this idea that when you think things aren't going to change or get better, it's hard to see the good things that do happen and the opportunities available for improvement when they appear. This is the exact kind of situation where that mindset thrives. The more negative experiences you have, the harder it is to see beyond the negativity, especially without external help. But let's pair it with the other two lines. The more you win, you end up with less than where you begin. Okay, first thoughts for this one. 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Even if you can see the positive, the negative comes back twofold. Ouch. I mean, not to keep mentioning my Glass of Water video, but I also talked about the idea of certain mindsets removing or dismissing a person's agency. Sometimes a person feels like a victim, sometimes, because they are a victim to themselves. Let me explain. You can look at this verse as a lament of the universe being against you, but let's flip it around. You against the universe? Us against the world? No, wait, that's not right. The more you win, you end up with less than where you begin. This is the tragedy of greed. We've seen it. The story of a man, let's face it, a white man, who gets a taste of power and cannot let go. Let's say the knife of power stabs his soul. Is that acceptable? And once that knife is in, there's no coming out. That knife will go in deeper. The desire for power begets only more desire. Before we go further, what does this have to do with the rest of the song? Musically, we know this segment stands out, but lyrically, does this come completely out of left field? Is this song actually just an incoherent mess both musically and lyrically? The atmosphere of a rainy day blankets the song, as it should. It really does feel like sitting inside on a gloomy, overcast day watching the rain hit the window. Kinda like when you're stuck inside as a kid and all you can do is stare outside, longing to go out and play. Overall, there's a sense of loneliness here. I mean, Chris does literally sing, "My lonely little heart will it broke again" before this knife part. If it weren't for spending the night with the Queen of Spain, I would wholeheartedly argue you could interpret this song as being from the perspective of a little kid stuck inside on a rainy day missing their friends. That line I can't really make sense of if it's not of at least a more adult nature, not necessarily 100% adult, but at least a PG-13, you know? So instead, I think it's just evoking that inner homebound child within us. Definitely there's an eerie, ethereal kind of feeling within the entire song. The gold and green sky makes me think of auroras, this natural phenomenon of colored lights in the sky. It's a beauty which we see in the darkness, the bride night's veil. It's not rain, but solar wind that causes these magnificent displays, but I think we can look past that. This song is evoking a feeling, not giving us a science lesson. So we start with darkness and move into yet another expression of water as a destructive force. The sound foundations are crumbling, to the ground comes the pyramid tumbling. All the while, we're outside of time. It gives me this vision of walking through some kind of stormy void among massive collapsing structures. Also, kudos if you've ever been able to hear anything coherent for those last two lines. Then the chorus comes in, and Chris's voice no longer has the same distortion as before. The strings come in strong, like that sudden eye of the storm, perhaps a brief moment of sun before the rain comes back. Seems pretty straightforward. This is further pushing the idea of isolation, loneliness. Afterward, the rain comes back. More loneliness, with now a taste of desperation. He doesn't sound too happy about his experience spending the night with the Queen of Spain in any case. Plus, time has started to turn as well. No longer is there any carefree spirit within the relation to time. Things are going bad. And that pretty much covers the lyrics. We have the knife part, then the chorus repeats a couple of times. So up until this point, the central theme of the song has been loneliness. Although the music, to me at least, sounds like listening to rain through the window, when we hear Chris, it sounds like we hear him from the outside. That distortion creates a separation between him and those of us listening. We know the knife means things are getting worse no matter who's at fault. But the deeper it goes and the more is gained in one respect, an even greater total loss occurs overall. From a certain point of view, this filter of greed, the tragedy lies in that the actions a person takes to obtain their gains, even if with initially good intentions, eventually cause the loss by pushing away the people close to them. We can see this clearly in two examples I'll discuss here: Walter White and Anakin Skywalker. The show Breaking Bad begins with Walter White's cancer diagnosis and his first foray into making meth. This starts as a way for Walter to make money in order to pay for his cancer treatment and for his family to survive should he pass away.
It's just I don't have the greatest insurance.
That's life in the US. Over time, though, Walter realizes what it feels like to hold power and discovers a version of himself that has been lurking underneath the surface all his life. A version of himself that can lord over anyone who tries to threaten him. He adopts the alias Heisenberg and thus becomes more than a man, a legend. His original focus on his family slowly fades into the distance. Walt does actually accomplish his goal of earning enough money for his family. But nothing gold can say. Walt's knife pierces at the series' beginning, and the deeper that knife goes in, the deeper he finds himself in the meth enterprise, the harder it becomes to separate out from his past life. Eventually, his wife and son discover the truth of who Walt is now and what he has done in the time since his diagnosis. Truly unspeakable things. The revelation colors the way his family sees him. He's not the man they knew anymore. They don't want anything to do with this man. His newborn daughter will never get to know him past his actions now either. Meanwhile, the stakes have escalated for Walter and he finds himself wanted by many people. In the finale, Walt is alone, even to the very last shot. Before that moment, he goes back to his wife, Skylar, and admits to her that he did not do what he did for the sake of his family. He did it for himself, because he liked having that power and because he was good at what he did. His relentless pursuit drove everyone he cared about away from him and left him for dead. Did he regret it? Walt took his last moments walking around and admiring the equipment that symbolizes his whole journey as Heisenberg before collapsing. It seems like maybe he would do it all again if he could. Still though, it's clear to see that the show provides a cautionary tale for going down this kind of path. Even if Walt got some of what he wanted in the end, it came at the cost of destroying his family. They suffered loss as well. Another story of this kind comes from Star Wars, particularly the prequel trilogy of episodes 1 through 3. Anakin Skywalker spent a fair amount of time in his youth enslaved on Tatooine, along with his mother, before being taken away to train as a Jedi. From the day he left, his ultimate goal was to become powerful enough to come back and free his mother. This was a promise he made to her. Years later, when Anakin began to sense that his mother was in trouble, or soon would be, he sought help from the more experienced Jedi around him but was brushed off. He eventually went to help her but found it was too late. His mother died in his arms. He had the chance to see her before she passed, but that was not what he wanted. Immediately after, Anakin went on a rampage and slaughtered the entire village of Tusken Raiders where his mother had been held, including, he notes, the women and children. At this point, Anakin had been trained but felt himself not powerful enough because he couldn't save his mother. His failed promise weighed heavily on his conscience, yet he blamed this mostly on the Jedi, and especially his master Obi-Wan, for holding him back. By the start of the final movie in the trilogy, Anakin had begun having visions of his wife Padme dying as well. In an effort to once again seek the power that would allow him to save the ones he loves, Anakin falls under the spell of Senator Palpatine, secretly the Sith Lord Sidious. This marks Anakin's true turn to the dark side. After the execution of Order 66 and the announcement of the Republic's transformation into the First Galactic Empire, Anakin ends up on Mustafar, where Padme soon joins him in an attempt to pull him back to the light side.
Anakin, all I want is your love.
Love won't save you, Padme. Only my new powers can do that.
At what cost? You're a good person. Don't do this.
I won't lose you the way I lost my mother. I am becoming more powerful than any Jedi has ever dreamed of, and I'm doing it for you, to protect you.
Unfortunately, it does not work, as Anakin sees that Obi-Wan also arrived with Padme and believes that Obi-Wan has turned Padme against him. This is not the case, but of course Anakin does not see the truth in Padme's words, that his own actions are what have turned her against him. In a fit of paranoid rage, Anakin force chokes Padme and she falls to the ground, unconscious. Anakin and Obi-Wan proceed to fight, battling in a duel which ultimately leaves Anakin laying on the ground, his limbs cut off, lava burning his entire body. Palpatine rescues Anakin and puts him inside the mechanical suit he, as Darth Vader, is so known for in the original trilogy. At the same time, Padme gives birth to her and Anakin's twin children and dies shortly after. Although this is pretty contested, Palpatine informs Anakin that it was his doing. It seems, in your anger, you killed her. Whether or not this is strictly true, it is clear that Anakin's relentless pursuit of the power which would allow him to save Padme ultimately fulfilled his prophetic vision of her death. Whereas Walter White died with no one on his side, Padme still had not given up on Anakin. Her dying words reflected her remaining faith in him. But once again, our protagonist is alone. His wife, dead. His Jedi Master left him for dead. His children, the child he couldn't be sure survived, and the surprise twin, hidden away from him. Palpatine was the only one left in Vader's life. And that sucks. So we bring it back to Coldplay and The Rainy Day. The loneliness that pervades the song comes from the loss, focusing too much on what there is to gain and pushing away what you already have to get it. We don't have as much of a narrative for this Rainy Day protagonist, but it is nice to have more of the reflective perspective after the fact. Looking back and realizing what you did to accomplish your goals negated every effort. Then there was rain.